Hello, all. This is Adya, and my topic for today is the changing landscape or the changing dynamics of the India USA relations in the 21st century. Let us first look at the bilateral relationship between these two countries. We can see that in the last few years, the India US bilateral relations have developed into a global strategic partnership which is based on shared democratic values and increasing convergence of ideas and interests on bilateral, regional, and global issues. These two countries have created a lot of opportunities to further enhance their bilateral ties and to grow cooperation under the motto Chale Saath Saath Forward Together We Go. Recently, in the last 2 decades, there has been regular exchange of high level political visits, which has proved and provided sustained momentum to the bilateral cooperation. Also, the ever expanding dialogue architecture has established a long term framework for India US engagement. We can see that while only 3 of the 9 US presidents during 1947 to 2000 visited India, every president in the last 2 decades has visited India at least once. Many reasons could be ascribed to the higher frequency of visits, like shift in the global geopolitics in the post Cold War era, India's economic ascent, the rise of an assertive China, etc. We can also see that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited USA in September 2014. Moving further, we'll be talking about the brief history of India USA relations. The relationships between India and US in the days of British Raj and United States were thin. Swami Vivekananda promoted yoga and Vedanta in United States. Mahatma Gandhi had an important influence on the philosophy of non-violence promoted by the American civil rights movement leader Martin Luther King in the 1950s. But everything changed during the World War II when India became the main base for the American China Burma India theater in the war against Japan. Serious tension also erupted when America, under US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, demanded that India should be given independence, a proposition which Winston Churchill, the then British Prime Minister, vehemently rejected. Talking about the India USA relations in the post independence era of India, we can see that the post independence Indo US relations were overshadowed by Cold War politics. The Indo US friendship and the US Pakistan alliance were the two major irritants. During the Cold War, India's policy of non alignment was perceived negatively by the US officials. However, Presidents Kennedy and Johnson were in favor of maintaining good relations with India. The Kennedy administration openly supported India during the 1962 Sino Indian War and considered Chinese action as mere communist aggression against India. The United States Air Force also flew in arms, ammunition, and clothing supplies to the Indian troops, along with aircraft carrier to protect India. But the support was short lived because following the assassination of Kennedy in 1963, the Indo US relations deteriorated gradually. The 1965 Indo Pakistan War undid everything. Washington lost interest in the region. Dramatic turn of events occurred in the 1990s when the Cold War was terminated. The 1990s saw the disintegration of the Soviet Union and also US Pakistan relations deteriorated. This was due to Pakistan's secret nuclear program. In addition to this, Indian foreign policy also developed closer ties with the United States. In the 21st century, India emerged as an increasingly vital country to US foreign policy interests. India in today's time is a dominant actor in its region and is the home for more than 1 billion citizens. It is now characterized as a great power and an indispensable partner of the USA. It is a potential counterweight to the growing cult of China. In March 2000, when US President Bill Clinton visited India, the Indo US Science and Technology Forum was established. Over the course of improved diplomatic relations with the US under Bush administration, India agreed to allow close international monitoring of its nuclear weapons development, although it refused to give up its current nuclear arsenal. After the 9/11 attacks against the US in 2001, USA collaborated closely with India in controlling and policing the strategically critical Indian Ocean sea lanes from the Suez Canal to Singapore. Since 2004, Washington and New Delhi have been pursuing a strategic partnership that is based on shared values and generally convergent geopolitical interests. There has been numerous economic, security, and global initiatives which have been collaborated upon. Now let us look at some of the areas of divergence between India and US. There are three main areas in this relation. These are trade deal, internal issues, and USA's criticism of India's foreign policy. Talking about trade deal. Trade deal has been a major bone of contention between India and US. India has been referred by the US as tariff king that imposes tremendously high import duties. Donald Trump formulated America First policy on the economic dimension. It means reducing the US trade deficits with major trading partners including India. In accordance to this, in June 2019, the Trump administration decided to terminate India's benefits under the GSP scheme, which provides preferential duty-free access for over $6 million worth of products exported from this country to the US. The removal of the GSP list amid rising trade tensions promoted India to finally impose tariffs on several American imports. This made US approach the WTO against India. The Office of the US Trade Representative has underlined India's measures to restrict companies from sending personal data of its citizens outside the country as a key barrier to digital trade. Also, the US has long demanded greater access to American agriculture and dairy product. For India, protecting its domestic agriculture and dairy interest was a major reason to walk out of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership or the RCEP agreement. Next, we'll be looking at USA's criticism of India's foreign policy. India's policy of non-alignment, especially during the Cold War, has always been a point of concern for the West, especially for the US. After the 9/11 attacks, the US asked India to dispatch troops to Afghanistan. The Indian military vetoed the request, due to which tensions emerged between India and USA. When the US invaded Iraq in 2003, even then, India's erstwhile Prime Minister withheld military support. Even today, India refuses to toe the American line on the Russian-Ukrainian war, and its import of cheap Russian oil continues to break records. There has been various USA organizations and foundations from time to time which criticizes the kind of democracy being exercised in India. There have been reports questioning the present state of democratic discourse, press and religious freedom, and conditions of the minorities in India. These reports include the International Religious Freedom Report 2023 and the Human Rights Report on India 2021 by the US State Department. Next, we'll be looking at some internal issues in India which prove as a point of divergence between the relations of India and USA. India-US strong strategic partnership is also based on an idea of shared values of democracy, rule of law, religious freedom, and protection of minorities. However, the revocation of Article 370, the new citizenship law, and the NRC is testing this shared values principle. Though the US president maintained that these matters are internal to India, criticism from the US Congress and some parts of US civil society is pushing the US administration to tell India to bring Kashmir to normalcy and not to go ahead with the new citizenship law followed by the NRC. The Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign has also exacerbated the view in USA that India is increasingly becoming a protectionist closed market economy. This is creating kind of a tension between India and USA. Talking about the points of convergence in India-US relations, in the post-Cold War era, India's relation with US on defense and strategic issues have strengthened. These can be reflected in the following points. First is COMCASA, or the Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement, which is a foundational military agreement that allows for the sharing of encrypted communications and equipments. There has been a change in US export control laws that places India in a privileged category of NATO and non-NATO US allies. There has been signing of the Industrial Security Annex that will allow for greater collaboration among the two countries' private defense industries. The new 2+2 Foreign and Defense Ministers Dialogue, the bilateral strategic energy partnership launched in April 2018, contribute to further expanding the relationship between these two countries. There has been inauguration of the first India-US tri-service military exercise and expansion of existing military services. There is inclusion of India and South Asia in the US Maritime Security Initiative. These intense engagements have helped to achieve robust support from the US against terrorism. This was evident after the Pulwama attack, which led to the designation of Jaish-e-Mohammed Chief Masood Azhar as a global terrorist under the UN Security Council Resolution 1267. India is also seen as the biggest trading partner for US. Backed by increasing economic ties, the United States has emerged as India's biggest trading partner in 2022-23. The bilateral trade between India and US increased by 7.65% to $128.55 billion in 2022 to 23, as against $119.5 billion in 2021 to 22, according to the provisional data of the Commerce Ministry reported news agency PTI. Now we'll be looking at the significance of Indian diaspora to further expand the relationship between India and US. First point we'll be covering is economic contributions. Indian diaspora plays a crucial role in economic development of both their host countries and India. They're actively engaged in diverse sectors such as technology, finance, healthcare, and entrepreneurship, creating jobs, generating wealth, and fostering innovations. The Indian diaspora also serves as a cultural bridge, promoting Indian culture, traditions, and values in their host countries. Talking about academic and intellectual contributions, the Indian diaspora has made significant contributions to academia, research, and intellectual pursuits in their significant fields. The Indian diaspora has also gained political prominence in many countries, particularly in the United States. This increases the relationship between India and US in the 21st century. There have been strengthening of the bilateral relations between these two countries due to the Indian diaspora, which acts as a bridge between India and their host country, fostering closer ties and enhanced bilateral relations. The personal connections, cultural understanding, and business network facilitate trade, investment, and collaborations in various sectors, contributing to the growth of bilateral relations. The Indian diaspora, and particularly in countries with significant populations like USA, has the potential to increase electoral influence or outcomes. They can mobilize support for candidates who are sympathetic to Indian interests and issues, thereby impacting political landscape and policy priorities. There is political like-mindedness in both the countries. Both the countries have like-mindedness views about the efficiency for continued growth, peace, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. India has also joined the US-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity. However, the two countries have quite contradictory response towards the Russia-Ukraine crisis, Afghanistan issues, and Iran. Moving further, we'll be looking at India's multi-aligned foreign policy. Since the end of Cold War, Indian leaders have sought to improve ties with the US, but not by curtailing India's independent approach to foreign policy. India cannot be termed as a US ally due to its foreign policy approach of non-alignment. The PM Modi has described the world as one family, which is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, to frame Indian diplomacy. The approach has been termed as multi-alignment, seeking positive ties as far and as widely as possible. Along this theory, India has carefully managed its relation with Saudi Arabia as well as Iran, with Israel as well as the Palestinian territories, with the US as well as Russia. India has reserved the right to engage with those who aren't the US allies like Russia, Iran, and even China, if its national interests dictate such a need. To end this presentation, I'll be talking about few ways to improve Indo-US relations. India should move ahead with multi-alignment, and India should calibrate the balancing act and bring dialogue and diplomacy to resolve strong differences. There should be increasing defense cooperation among the two countries. The new India-US defense partnership can make it possible to conceive of an Asia that is not vulnerable to domination by any one power. Both India and the US have a strong interest in stabilizing the Asian power of balance and coping with the geopolitical churn triggered by China's rise and Beijing's assertiveness in Asia. There should be more economic intermingling. India's economic rise would be in US interest just as much as US leadership of technology enablers and global affairs would be in India's. Creating interdependencies between the two nations is crucial. There should be cooperation in sustainable development. Initiatives like the revamped US-India Strategic Clean Energy Partnership exemplify cooperation in fostering the growth of renewable energy development in India. The US can further assist by facilitating access to funds for India's ambitious goals. The private sector should be engaging for both countries. There should be expanding coverage to food security. The US is at the forefront of technologies not just in defense, space, and semiconductors but also in agriculture. The next round of India US collaborations will involve a special attempt to include food and agriculture as one of the core areas of cooperation. It has a potential to do to the maximum number of people in the developing world, be it in Asia or Africa. That's all from my side. Thank you, everyone. At the end, I've presented some of the references which I've used in the making of this presentation. Thank you.